Have you ever walked away from someone feeling everything and still doubting your own mind because their words never matched the connection you could swear was there? Have you ever heard someone speak with distance while their attention felt intimate, their eyes stayed longer than they meant to, and their actions said more than their mouth ever would? Stay with me, because this changes everything. Some people do not speak love in a warm, clear, easy way. They speak it in fragments, in pauses, in mixed signals that are not always fake, just frightened. And if you have ever been left replaying a conversation again and again, wondering if you imagined the bond, this will hit hard, because the person who fears closeness often does not move away from love because it is weak. They move away because it is strong, strong enough to shake the system they built to survive, strong enough to make them hide what matters most. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. The cold comment, the strange honesty, the sudden need for space right after intimacy, the quiet protection, the almost confession that slips out and is quickly covered. None of it is random, none of it is clean either, but it has meaning. And before this is over, you may finally understand the difference between someone who never cared and someone who cared so much they could only show it sideways. Most people are taught to recognize love in a very direct form. The feeling grows, trust builds, the words come, and the message is clear. A secure person may feel nervous, but they usually move toward closeness, not away from it. Their inner world and outer behavior travel in the same direction. They care, so they show it. They feel love, so they name it. Their vulnerability may tremble, but it still moves forward. That is why their affection feels grounding. It lands clean. It lets your nervous system rest. But with someone wired to avoid emotional exposure, the process often flips completely. The feeling grows, sometimes with shocking depth. And instead of pushing them toward expression, it pushes them toward control, toward hiding, toward softening the truth before it reaches the surface. The stronger the attachment becomes, the more active their defenses become. Not because the bond is fake, but because it is real enough to feel dangerous. This is the part many people miss. They assume emotional distance means emotional absence. It does not always. Sometimes distance is the cover placed over intensity. Sometimes silence is not emptiness. It is pressure. It is somebody trying to hold back what feels too risky to reveal. And if you keep trying to read them through the normal language of open affection, you will miss what is happening right in front of you. You will call it confusion when it is fear. You will call it indifference when it is concealment. And yes, that can break your heart if you do not know what you are looking at. So let us translate this language slowly and clearly. Not the dramatic moments, not the rare scene where the wall drops and something obvious slips out. I mean the everyday lines, the phrases that sound ordinary, detached, or even slightly wrong, but carry far more weight than people realize. This is where it gets deeper, because a person who avoids direct vulnerability often turns devotion into disguised behavior. They will not always say, "I miss you." They may ask if you got home safe. They will not always say, "You matter to me." They may remember a tiny detail you mentioned once at random 3 weeks ago. They will not say, "I am scared to lose this." They may suddenly become awkward, critical, withdrawn, or strangely serious after a moment of closeness. That is the paradox. Their love can sound like deflection. Their care can arrive dressed as practicality. Their investment can show up as tension. And if you do not understand the structure underneath it, you may reject the very thing you spent so long trying to receive. None of this means you should accept crumbs forever. We will get to that. But first, I want to make something clear. What you sensed may have been real. What felt charged may have been charged. What seemed bigger than the words probably was. Because for some people, love does not come out as a clean sentence. It comes out bent. It comes out hidden. It comes out in pieces that only make sense once you know the pattern. One of the first signs is a kind of attention that comes out sounding like criticism. I know that sounds strange, so stay with me. When someone like this starts noticing very specific things about you, not your public image, but your private habits, your tone shifts, your little contradictions, that level of attention is rarely casual. They notice how you hold tension in your jaw when you pretend you are fine. They notice how your voice changes when you speak about something you truly care about versus something you are just being polite about. They notice which joke you use when you are uncomfortable. They notice the pause before you answer certain questions. And then, Because open tenderness feels too exposing. What comes out is a sideways comment, something that sounds more like analysis than admiration, more like observation than affection. Maybe they point out that you always say you are okay right before you shut down. Maybe they tease the way you overthink simple things. Maybe they mention a pattern in you that nobody else has bothered to see. On the surface, it can feel sharp, but underneath, it often reveals deep mental focus. You do not study someone at that level when they mean nothing to you. You do not collect tiny details about a person you are emotionally untouched by. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. When they cannot stop noticing you, it usually means you are living in their mind, and because saying that directly would feel too raw, the noticing gets dressed up as commentary instead. There is more inside that pattern than people realize. The critical tone is often the safest container they have for intimacy. If they said the real sentence, it might sound like this: I see you very clearly, more clearly than I wanted to, and it is affecting me. But that sentence is too naked, too exposed, so instead they point out your habits, your tells, your inconsistencies, your emotional rhythms. That is how attention leaks when affection is blocked from direct release. Of course, not every criticism is hidden love. Some criticism is just criticism. That matters. Context matters. Tone matters. Repetition matters. The difference is whether their attention feels precise and personal or simply harsh and dismissive. One wounds to create distance, the other reveals distance is already collapsing. Watch carefully. If they remember small things, circle back to old details, track the shifts in your mood, and somehow know when something is off before you say it. You are not dealing with indifference, you are dealing with someone who is paying very close attention while trying not to admit why, and that creates a strange experience for the other person. You feel seen but not always soothed. You feel noticed but not always openly cherished. That mismatch is exactly why the connection can feel so maddening. Yet it is also why so many people later say, I knew there was something there, I just could not explain it. You could not explain it because the message was scrambled, but scrambled is not the same as absent. Another line that matters is some version of, I am not good at this. On the surface it sounds like a warning, a disclaimer, a setup for disappointment. And yes, sometimes it can be used that way. But when it appears in the middle of a bond that is clearly getting deeper, it often carries a hidden layer that even they may not fully recognize. What they are really saying is, I feel the importance of this, and it scares me that I may not know how to handle it well. There is insecurity inside that sentence. There is pressure. There is the quiet fear of failing at something that suddenly matters too much. People do not measure themselves against a connection unless they are invested in it. They do not worry about being enough for someone they truly do not care about. Fear of inadequacy is usually a sign of attachment, not apathy. Listen closely to the emotional structure. If somebody says, I am bad at relationships, or I do not know how to do this, right when closeness is growing, the deeper message may be, I can feel myself wanting this more than I expected, and now I am afraid of what my limits will cost us. That is not the same as healthy communication, but it is not nothing. It is a crack in the armor. It is an accidental confession wearing the clothes of self-protection. And if you have ever heard that line and felt both warned and invited at the same time, that is because you probably were. The fear was real. The pull was real too. Many people hear that sentence and assume it is only a polite way of saying, do not expect much from me. Sometimes that interpretation is correct, and we have to be honest about that. But often there is another truth hiding underneath. The person is revealing that your presence has activated self-awareness. Suddenly they are not just drifting, they are comparing who they are with who they feel this connection might require them to become. That inner comparison creates anxiety. It can even create shame. They may look calm while internally feeling completely exposed. They may pull back right after saying something vulnerable, not because the feeling vanished, but because the honesty itself scared them. This is why mixed signals intensify around emotional turning points. A deep talk happens, then distance. A soft moment lands, then silence. A meaningful confession slips out, then a joke quickly covers it. Watch what happens next, because this is where many people get lost. They assume the retreat cancels the truth that came before it. It does not always. Sometimes the retreat confirms how real the moment was. If the bond were casual, the honesty would not feel so dangerous. If you meant very little, there would be no urgent need to control the emotional impact. Again, this does not mean you should carry the whole connection alone. It means do not misread fear as proof that nothing was there. Sometimes fear is what appears when something important is finally being felt. Another phrase that carries huge meaning is, "You are different." It may come softly, it may come defensively, it may sound warm, confused, annoyed, fascinated, or almost accusing, as if your difference created a problem they were not prepared for. But however it arrives, it matters. A person who relies on emotional distance usually survives by sorting people quickly. They place others into familiar categories, safe enough, predictable enough, not too close, not too deep. That system lets them engage without feeling overwhelmed. But when someone keeps breaking the pattern, the system starts to fail. You do not respond the way they expected. You do not chase in the usual way, or maybe you do care, but without the manipulation they learned to expect. Maybe you see more than they wanted seen, yet you do not use it against them. Maybe your calm unsettles them because it removes the old script. Maybe your consistency exposes how much chaos they are used to. When that happens, they start saying things like, "You are different, I do not usually do this, I do not know why I am telling you this, or I am not like this with other people." Those are not casual sentences, those are signs that their internal map has been interrupted. You no longer fit inside the old categories that kept them safe, and that means you have reached a place inside them most people never reach. Not all the way, not fully. These walls often have many layers, but enough to matter, enough to disrupt the old system, enough to make them feel both drawn in and unsettled. The phrase can also come with tension because difference creates uncertainty, and uncertainty feels dangerous to a person who survives through control. If they cannot predict you, they cannot fully manage their own emotional exposure. So while part of them may feel deeply moved by your presence, another part may react with caution, irritability, or confusion. This is why a compliment from them may feel almost like a complaint. "You are different" may really mean, "I cannot put you in the normal box, and because of that, I cannot protect myself in the usual way." There is attraction in that, there is alarm in that too, and both can exist at once. That is why these connections often feel so intense. You are witnessing desire and defense in the same breath, pull and panic, warmth and resistance. When people do not understand this, they tend to flatten the meaning. They say, if they cared, they would just show it. In an ideal world, yes, but real people often show exactly where they are wounded. Real love does not erase old protection overnight. It brushes against it, it exposes it, it tests it. So if someone says you are different and you can feel the sentence carrying more weight than the words alone, trust that instinct. Something in them has been altered, something in their usual emotional organization is being challenged. And for a person who has spent years keeping closeness manageable, that is not a tiny moment. That is a major event, even if they try to play it off 5 seconds later. Then there is one of the most misunderstood lines of all. "I do not need anyone." In a surface reading, that sounds like pure independence, a hard wall, a final statement. But inside a deepening connection, that sentence often means the exact opposite of what it says. It usually appears when they have started to notice your impact on them, and it scares them. Their baseline is changing. Your absence feels louder than it used to. Your messages matter more than they want them to. The day feels subtly different when you are close and when you are not. That is dependency beginning to register, and for someone organized around self-protection, that can feel like an emergency, so they rush to reassert the old identity. "I do not need anyone. I am fine on my own. I can handle myself." Listen carefully. That is often not a neutral fact. It is a protest. A quick attempt to restore internal control before the new attachment becomes too obvious. They are not always trying to inform you, they are trying to calm themselves. They felt the pull, and now they are countering it. They felt the need, and now they are denying it out loud, so it becomes easier to bear. That is why the timing matters so much. If the statement appears right after emotional closeness, right after being seen, right after dependence has quietly begun to grow, then the wall itself is evidence that something real has been touched. The protest becomes the proof, the denial becomes the signal. And this is where people can become deeply confused because the line sounds so final when the emotion underneath is actually fragile. You hear, "I do not need anyone," and your heart hears rejection. Meanwhile, inside them, the truth may be closer to, "I can feel myself needing you, and that terrifies me more than I know how to admit." Again, we need balance here. This is not a license to romanticize every cold statement. Some people really are unavailable and unwilling to grow. But sometimes what looks like certainty is a panic response. That matters if you are trying to understand what happened. Notice whether their behavior quietly contradicts their declaration. Do they say they need nobody, yet keep returning to you? Do they insist on distance, yet track your presence, your mood, your availability? Do they claim detachment, yet become visibly thrown off when they sense emotional loss? Words matter, actions matter more, repetition matters most. If the sentence of independence keeps colliding with acts of attachment, then you are likely seeing an inner conflict, not a simple truth. A part of them wants freedom from need, another part has already formed a bond, and the strain between those two parts creates the confusing push and pull that leaves so many people emotionally exhausted. You are not crazy for feeling both the care and the wall. Both were probably there at the same time. One of the quietest but strongest signs is when they protect you in small ways they never announce. Not a giant performance, not a dramatic public gesture, something smaller, cleaner, easier to miss if you are only watching for obvious romance. They make a conversation easier for you without drawing attention to it. They soften a situation before it reaches you. They speak up for you when you are not there. They remember something that helps you and act on it without making it into a scene. They walk on the outside of the sidewalk. They check the route. They notice when you are overwhelmed and shift something practical to reduce the pressure. They defend your name in spaces where you are absent. They make room for your comfort without turning it into a favor you now owe them for. That kind of care is powerful because it often comes from a place deeper than performance. There is no applause built into it, no direct reward, no easy emotional credit. It is just protection, quiet, useful, almost invisible protection. And people rarely do that consistently for someone who means nothing. This kind of person may never say, "I want to keep you safe." They may not even consciously frame it that way themselves, but their behavior reveals a protective instinct that has already formed. In many cases, that is one of the purest ways their love becomes visible. They cannot say the tender sentence yet, so they create a tender outcome and pretend it was only practical. Pay attention to the tone too. Often they will do something very caring and then act as if it was no big deal. That is not always because the care was small. It is often because acknowledging the tenderness behind it would expose too much. The softer tone is blocked, so the act stays practical. This is one of the loudest quiet declarations a person can make. The things we do with no need for recognition often reveal our deepest loyalties. If someone repeatedly makes your life a little easier, a little safer, a little less heavy, while refusing to dramatize it, that matters. It means you exist in their concern. It means your well-being has entered their decision-making. They are factoring you in. And being factored in is not a minor thing. It means you are no longer outside the gate. You are affecting behavior. You are shaping choices. That is intimacy, even if it is not verbal intimacy yet. This is also why losing someone like this can hurt in such a specific way. The love was rarely loud enough to point at, but it was present enough to live inside your nervous system. It was in the details, in the timing, in the concern hidden under routine. That is hard to explain to people on the outside. They say, well, did they ever really say how they felt? And you sit there knowing that the real story lived in everything they quietly did when they thought nobody was measuring it. There is another pattern people miss. When someone like this is falling hard, they often become strangely sincere in flashes and then quickly retreat. They may tell you something unusually personal out of nowhere. They may admit a fear in one sentence and then become distant the next day. They may ask a question that reveals deep emotional interest, then change the subject before the moment fully opens. These are not random emotional accidents. They are test moments. The truth rises, touches air, and then defense rushes in to control the exposure. That is why the connection can feel cinematic and confusing at the same time. You get these startling moments of real closeness, and then just as you begin to trust them, the energy changes. If you have lived through that, you know how disorienting it is. One moment you feel chosen, the next you feel shut out. But often what happened is not that the feeling disappeared, it is that the person reached their tolerance limit for emotional exposure. They hit the edge of what they could bear. That edge is important. It tells you where the wound still lives. It tells you how much desire is colliding with how much fear. And yes, it can create a bond that feels addictive if you are not careful, because intermittent warmth can keep hope alive, even when clarity is missing. So understand the pattern, but do not let understanding become self-abandonment. That part matters more than ever. Because now we need to hold two truths at once. First, indirect love can still be real. Second, real love that stays indirect forever can still hurt you deeply. Knowing how to read these signals can save you from dismissing your own experience. It can help you stop telling yourself that you invented the connection. It can bring peace to the parts of you that knew something meaningful was happening, even when the language around it was messy. But understanding someone's hidden affection does not mean you must spend your life decoding it. Translation is useful. Permanent translation is exhausting. There comes a point where even if the feeling is real, the form is no longer enough. You deserve to receive love in a way your body can rest inside. Not only through clues, not only through side comments, protective acts, and emotional fragments that leave you guessing. You deserve words that carry their own meaning. You deserve steadiness. You deserve the kind of directness that lets your heart come down from alert mode. This is so important, so hear me clearly. Being able to recognize hidden love is wisdom. Settling for endless ambiguity is another matter entirely. Those are not the same thing. One brings clarity, the other can trap you in hope. And if this is speaking right into your story, stay with me, because this last part is where everything comes together. A person who loves this way can absolutely grow. They can learn to move from guarded affection toward clear expression.